you like our quiet time together, make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel and let me know what stories you'd like to read in the future or anything else that really tickles your tingles that's related to my work as an elementary school teacher. Today we're going to start with some deep breaths, and then we'll share an affirmation to warm our hearts and set our intentions for our reading today. We will talk about something called dialogue tags that we can pay attention to as we read that also help us become better writers as well as we read this book called Miss Nelson is Missing by Harry Allard and illustrated by James Marshall. I think you can see why this book is so special to me, Miss Nelson. Let's start with some deep breaths. We're going to breathe in through our nose and out through our mouths. One more. Our whole body uses oxygen, which is what we breathe in, especially our brains. It helps our body relax and feel full and healthy and ready, and it also helps our brains to engage. Our affirmation today goes like this: I choose kindness. I choose kindness. There are a lot of things that happen every day in our lives, and we have a choice about what we do in that situation and how we react. And it's not possible for everyone to be kind all the time. Nobody's perfect. I know I'm not. But we can set our intentions to try and choose kindness when we are able to make the choice for ourselves. There are times when we might be frustrated and we could have an angry feeling, but we can choose how to react and show and express that feeling. It's okay to be angry, but I can express my anger in kindness or not in kindness. For example, I could say, I know you didn't mean to do that. I still love you, but I'm very angry. That really upset me. You see, I'm expressing anger, but I'm still showing kindness and understanding. If I was not choosing kindness in that moment, I might just yell and say, you did this awful thing, and I'm so angry at you. We can choose kindness when we come into a new space and we are going to choose what we do, how we use that space, and how we treat it. If I'm going to somebody's house, should I put my shoes up on the couch, or should I leave them on the floor? Leaving them on the floor is a way to choose kindness and show respect and care for somebody. So there are many times each day when we can make a choice about how we behave, how we react, and even how we express emotions that are not friendly feelings. We can still do it with kindness. One more time together. I choose kindness as often as I can. Again, no one's perfect. Today we're going to read this story called Miss Nelson is Missing. And in this book, in many stories, we're going to encounter something called a dialogue tag. A dialogue tag is something that comes after dialogue, which is what a character said, and it indicates how it was said. A dialogue tag could be said, yelled, whispered, shouted, snapped, howled, cried. So it's a word that indicates to the reader so that they know how to read it just exactly how something was said. The most common dialogue tag is Z. We see that one all the time because most of the time when people speak, when characters speak, they're just talking normally. But when we come along and find a dialogue tag, that's when we know we should be reading it a little bit differently, and it really helps us understand how the characters are feeling and how the story sounds. Let's practice dialogue tags a little bit before we find them in our story today. I start every episode of Quiet Time with Miss Nelson by saying the same thing. Do you remember? I say, "Hey kiddo, I'm glad you're here." The words "hey kiddo" could be said. I wrote that here. "Hey kiddo," I said. That's just normal saying it. Now, I could change this dialogue tag to something else, and then this would sound different. Let's try it. Now the dialogue tag is whispered. So, as I read this, it'll sound a little different. "Hey kiddo," I whispered. Just the dialogue is in the whisper. Let's change it one more time and see how it would sound different. Now the dialogue tag is asked. Think for a moment how that will sound different before we read it together. "Hey kiddo," I asked. That might be like I'm calling out to you. "Hey kiddo, did you want some lunch? Are you hungry? You want to read a story?" A dialogue tag tells us as a reader how somebody's speaking. Sometimes that also helps us understand how they're feeling. So, as we're reading, pay attention and be on the lookout for them. And after we're done, we'll go back and we'll take a look at them together. This is Miss Nelson is Missing by Harry Allard and illustrations by James Marshall. You might recognize his illustration style from many, many other books. The kids in room 207 were misbehaving again. Spitballs stuck to the ceiling. Paper planes whizzed through the air. They were the worst behaved class in the whole school. When they came into this space, did they choose kindness? "Now settle down," said Miss Nelson in a sweet voice. But the class would not settle down. They whispered and giggled. They squirmed and made faces. They were even rude during story hour. That's always my class's favorite part of the day, I can't imagine. And they always refused to do their lessons. "Something will have to be done," said Miss Nelson. She's coming up with a plan. The next morning, Miss Nelson did not come to school. "Wow," yelled the kids. "Now we can really act up." They began to make more spitballs and paper planes. Today, let's be just terrible, they said. Not so fast, hissed an unpleasant voice. A woman in an ugly black dress stood before them. I am your new teacher, Miss Viola Swamp. And she rapped the desk with her ruler. Where is Miss Nelson? Asked the kids. Never mind that, snapped Miss Swamp. Open those arithmetic books. Miss Nelson's kids did as they were told. They could see that Miss Swamp was a real witch. She meant business. Right away, she put them to work, and she loaded them down with homework. We'll have no story hour today, said Miss Swamp. Keep your mouth shut, said Miss Swamp. Sit perfectly still, said Miss Swamp. And if you misbehave, you'll be sorry, said Miss Swamp. Days went by, and there was no sign of Miss Nelson. The kids missed Miss Nelson. Now, when Miss Nelson came into the classroom space, she chose kindness. When Miss Viola Swamp came into the classroom space, she did not choose kindness. And look how it made everybody else feel. But look how they made her feel when they didn't choose kindness. When we don't choose kindness, it really has an impact on other people. Maybe we should try to find her, they said. Some of them went to the police station. Detective McSmog was assigned to the case. He listened to their story. He scratched his chin. He said. I think Miss Nelson is missing. Detective McSmog would not be much help. Other kids went to Miss Nelson's house. The shades were tightly drawn, and no one answered the door. In fact, the only person they did see was the wicked Miss Viola Swamp coming up the street. If she sees us, she'll give us more homework. They got away just in time. There they go, running away. Maybe something terrible happened to Miss Nelson. Maybe she was gobbled up by a shark, said one of the kids. But that didn't seem likely. Sharks. Very unpleasant. Do you think that's what happened? Maybe Miss Nelson went to Mars, said another kid. But that didn't seem likely either. Here's Miss Nelson, looking at the Earth from Mars. I know, exclaimed one know-it-all. Maybe Miss Nelson's car was carried off by a swarm of angry butterflies. But that was the least likely of all. The kids in room 207 became very discouraged. seemed that Miss Nelson was never coming back, and they would be stuck with Miss Viola Swamp forever. They heard footsteps in the hall. "Here comes the witch," they whispered. "Hello, children," someone said in a sweet voice. Who do you think it could be? It was Miss Nelson. "Did you miss me?" she asked. "We certainly did," cried all the kids. "Where were you?" "That's my little secret," said Miss Nelson. "How about a story hour?" "Oh, yes," cried the kids. Miss Nelson noticed that during story hour, no one was rude or silly. "What brought about this lovely change?" she asked. "That's our little secret," said the kids. She's still choosing kindness. They're choosing kindness. Everybody is happy. Back home, Miss Nelson took off her coat and hung it in the closet, right next to an ugly black dress. When it was time for bed, she sang a little song. "I'll never tell," she said to herself with a smile. In this picture, try to get it to focus. There are a lot of clues. The dress, shoes, a fake nose, and a box that says wig. Can you figure out what this picture is telling us? P.S. Detective McSmog is now working on a new case. He's now looking for Miss Viola Swamp. Thank you for reading that story with me. It's one of my favorites, and I think you can guess why. Now let's talk about the dialogue tags that we saw in that story. We saw said and asked and whispered. We also saw cried. Now, cried is a really interesting one that can be confusing if you don't pay attention to what's happening in the story when we see it. Let's go back to this page when Miss Nelson returned. "Did you miss me?" she asked. "We certainly did," cried all the kids. "Where were you?" "That's my little secret," said Miss Nelson. "How about a story hour?" "Oh, yes," cried the kids. I see cried twice there. We certainly did, and oh, yes. Now, are they crying? They're not crying. They're actually very happy, and they're not even crying happy tears. It's not about crying. When we see the dialogue tag cried, it means to cry out or to shout with emotion. Sometimes you'll see it when someone's feeling very happy, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's excitement. So, cried is a dialogue tag that will not be tricking you. I'm going to add some more on here. We have asked, cried, said, also saw exclaimed. Exclaimed is similar to cry. Usually you see it with an exclamation. Usually you see it with an exclamation point. It means kind of the same thing. It's kind of like shouting or saying a little bit louder and more excited. Another one I saw was when Miss Viola Swamp was talking. Snapped. Now, snapped is not like snapping your fingers, but it is kind of loud and quick like that. If you snap at someone, you are usually being mean or irritated or angry. Go to your room. Or stop that right now. That's talking in a snap. Snapping. Thank you for paying attention to dialogue tags with me today. They're an important part of understanding what you're reading, and they make you a better writer. Because as you are writing stories, you can include them in your writing. And your readers will enjoy it a lot more. I hope our quiet time today helped you learn more about choosing kindness. And we can see how our choices and whether we choose kindness or not really affects everybody else around us, because